to the members of the press and our distinguished guests. Thank you all for joining us here today as we discuss and deliberate the impact of COVID on education. We will also discuss how technology has stepped into the breach and will continue to play a key role in educating future generations. The session today will be moderated by Mr. Yogesh Bhatt, Senior Vice President and co-founder Masai School. Yogesh comes with an overall industry experience of 23 years, of which 8 years were in the training and development field. Yogesh, along with Prateek Shukla and Rupal Dev, founded Masai School last year. Masai School is India's first military-style coding school, which offers 24-week intensive coding programs for those aspiring to pursue a career as a software developer. Based out of Bengaluru, the company follows a unique ISA or income sharing model, which has greatly benefited learners by completely taking away the financial burden of gaining access to quality education. I would now like to invite Mr. Yogesh Bhatt to enlighten us about the initiative and take this webinar forward. Over to you, Yogesh.
Yeah, thank you, Divyata. Good afternoon to everybody. COVID-19, global pandemic, unprecedented impact, unprecedented uncertainty, unprecedented disruption on mankind. Not since the World War II, so many countries across the globe have been affected. The number shows that 1.6 billion learners globally and 300 million learners in India are currently under lockdown. This is the education researchers. They have said that there have been 3 waves of education over the last 2000 years. Education 1.0 was the Gurukul system, wherein which the one master to a few people. Education 2.0 was the traditional universities of one to many, and 3.0 was the distance learning. Necessity is the mother of invention. COVID-19 is a situation where the educational institutions, professional skilling organizations need to adapt and change and prepare our learners. Maybe this is the education 4.0. To talk about more about this, today we have 2 distinguished professionals from the field of education and practice. I would like to introduce to you Kashyap Dalal, Chief Business Officer and the co-founder at Simplilearn. Simplilearn is an global edutech company which focuses on digital skilling programs for professionals. The company is based out of San Francisco and Bangalore. Simplilearn has helped more than 1 million professionals and 1,000 companies across 150 countries to get trained, acquire certification, and reach their business and career goals. Kashyap drives the business growth strategy at Simplilearn and execution through product innovation, product marketing, and brand building. Prior to Simplilearn, Kashyap was the founder and CEO at Inkfruit.com, India's first democratic product-based brands. He began his career in Unilever in sales and marketing. Kashyap is passionate about building high-performance teams and enjoys being actively involved in problem-solving for business growth. Kashyap is an alumnus from IIT Bombay and Indian Institute of Management, Lucknow. In his spare time, he's a huge fan of Star Trek and loves reading fiction. He's also a certified diver and makes a point to log a few dives every year. Our second speaker today is Sumit Mehta, co-founder and CEO at Lead School. Lead School is an integrated learning system for schools that integrates technology, curriculum, and pedagogy into a single system of teaching and learning to improve students' learning and teachers' performance, both. At the moment, it is running largest online school in India. Sumit Mehta is a management executive who became an educator by choice. He has more than 20 years of experience in management and leadership positions in the field of education. As a co-founder of Lead School, Sumit is responsible for ensuring quality education that delivers an excellent curriculum to students across India. He is also instrumental for research and development, incorporating some of the best academic systems in the world to make education accessible and affordable to students of Lead School. Sumit is passionate about bringing learning excellence to every child in India and he believes democratizing education is the only way to build a more equitable and a developed nation. So thank you so much for joining us today for this discussion on how the future of education in the post-COVID world. I would like to invite Kashyap Dalal to share his views and insight and how this post-COVID world education is going to be led. Welcome on board, please.
Great. Thanks, Yogesh. I hope everybody can hear me clearly. Okay.
Yes,
Great.
Yes, Kashyap.
Yeah. So thanks, Yogesh. What I'll try and do is more put some structure to the entire evolution of EdTech. I think, as Yogesh mentioned, COVID-19 is a very unprecedented situation, and technology has a very big role to play to make sure that there is uninterrupted progress of education through this lockdown period. But I think it's important to understand a little bit about the history and where we are when we say EdTech and what it is capable of. And then we'll try and get into what exactly is the COVID situation and what we can expect, and what we can look forward to in the post-COVID scenario. So I think if we look at the history of EdTech, at least for the last 15 to 20 years, EdTech has been around in a meaningful way. And broadly, the way I think about it, it can be broken into three phases. The first phase is more where EdTech was clearly playing a very, very supplemental role to offline learning. And EdTech was essentially more in terms of building out multimedia content and some video content and, kind of engaging clippets that would be used more to substantiate the offline learning, which continued to be the primary channel of learning. So this was maybe some period of the 90s and early 2000s. EdTech was essentially playing this supplemental role to offline learning. I feel in the last 5 to 10 years, EdTech has moved into a second phase, which is where it is about delivering a full learning experience. And when I say full learning experience, for example, if I take Simplilearn's example in the kind of programs that we conduct, we think of our product as classroom in the cloud. And the reason why we think of it as classroom in the cloud is because there is a fairly integrated online learning experience where you have online videos as equivalent of a textbook. So you have your e-learning content, which becomes a textbook in the entire learning experience. Then we have live experts who are actually teaching all the learners and helping them understand the concepts and so on. Then we have online labs and projects. So this is an environment available digitally where people can actually put their learnings into practice and build projects, understand how they work and so on. And finally, there's online assessment. So if you think about it, it's a fully integrated, full cycle learning experience, similar to what you would go through in any offline university or program, where you have a textbook, you have the entire learning delivery, which is very engaging. Then you have actual project work, and then you finally have assessments. And that finally delivers the learning experience that is responsible for good outcomes, right? So I think this is phase 2 of EdTech. A lot of companies, including us, have invested a lot of resources and energy into building the technology behind this. And I think that technology exists today. Phase 3 of EdTech, which has just begun over the last couple of years, and I think there's a whole lot more to come in this area, is about this entire area of making learning highly personalized. And I would say that phase 1 and phase 2 is where EdTech is still trying to solve the problem that is already solved in a more scalable way. That we know how learning happens in universities, and phase 1 and phase 2 is about using technology to do it in a more scalable way. But phase 3 is where you are actually getting into applications of technology which translates into something new, that something new is getting created in terms of the kind of experience that will come out of it. And to help understand this, if you look at it, the biggest problem of any classroom or any learning system is that you have people at different levels of knowledge. So you would have, and the speed at which you can go is your average learner speed. So there will always be some people who are left behind. There'll always be some people who are getting bored, right? So how does technology get applied to make sure that you are able to personalize the learning experience to each learner? Adaptive learning is one phrase that's been around for a while, but I think as AI advances, we are actually seeing it coming into its real potential and deliver what we are talking about. So that's one. Another area, a technology that we are implementing right now and in the phase of perfecting it over time, is that in our virtual classrooms, how do we use visual recognition and AI combined to give us clarity, saying that which are the learners who are engaged and which are the learners who are not, right? And therefore create tools in EdTech to enable the teacher that you need to focus on the people who are not as engaged. So that these are uses of technology that can fundamentally change education in the future, and it's really more gives a sense of things to come. So I think at a high level, I would say that phase two is where EdTech is. Phase three is in its nascency, and lot more will happen over there. But I think with that context, if we now look at the impact of COVID and the entire disruption that we have, so COVID, given the nature of this calamity, I think offline education is clearly going to be highly impacted, because thousands of learners coming and attending a school or a university, that is just unthinkable until a cure for COVID is found, right? So it's education, everything said and done, is not viewed as an essential life activity, that if you don't do it, then you're going to be left behind in life. It is something that is, you would definitely not risk a rapid spread of COVID to make sure that colleges open up and stuff like that. So I think we have to find alternatives, and which is where EdTech has a very, very key role to play. I'll talk more in the context of professional skilling, because that's the area in which Simplilearn operates. And here, high level, we can break it up into two parts. One is more this, that what is the need, and is there a strong demand in the COVID situation to upskill, for professionals to upskill? So there, the way we are seeing the development over the last couple of months is that there is a huge demand, because there is a lot of concern around what's going to happen to the economy. In the COVID situation, a downturn is going to happen. I think there are enough and more signs of it. And as a result, what we see is that people need to actually think about future-proofing their careers. So what we are already seeing is that people think about it in two ways. One, you can future-proof your career if you are ahead amongst your peer group. Second is if you are skilled in areas which are going to continue to grow. So on the professional skilling side, we see a huge demand explosion in terms of digital skills, because all of us can see that we are spending more and more of our time digitally. Recently, Comscore came out with a data that there is a 38% jump in the data consumption globally after the lockdowns. So, all that data, you will need professionals who interpret decisions, so on. Lot of companies are investing a whole lot of money into their cloud infrastructure to enable the entire company to work from home. Cyber security is hugely critical, especially as even banks have people working from home. So when you have banking and financial systems and everybody logging in remotely, then your cyber security becomes hugely critical. So we are seeing a huge upswing in these kind of skills, where people are clearly seeing that jobs in these areas are more secure, because there is going to be a increase in demand. Whereas other non-essential jobs, it's very likely that companies will take a call and kind of reduce their headcount. So I think from a skilling space, COVID-19 definitely results in a huge demand. And I would say on the delivery side, EdTech is at a stage already where they can handle thousands or even millions of learners who want to do these programs. So I think the phase two that I mentioned, all of that technology is already ready. And I think, from a transition perspective, I do not see that as a major concern. It is more about people changing their behaviors a little bit. And I think EdTech is ready to service this entire requirement at this stage. Practically, what do I see happening? I think we will see a lot of partnerships. We are already in discussions with a lot of offline universities, offline institutions who are very concerned that what will happen to the first semester of next year. And which is where I think win-win partnerships between some of these universities and online EdTech players like ourselves, it helps both sides to deliver great learning and great experience, even in this difficult time. So I think a lot more of that would happen. From a post-COVID situation, I feel that the phase-wise growth of EdTech is something that is here to stay. If anything, COVID as a disruption kind of accelerates that transition. But eventually, as an industry, this is like any other industry transition. I mean, in some ways, one parallel that I can think of is more your entertainment industry, right? That earlier all of us used to watch movies only in multiplexes and cinema halls. But today, if you think back, a very high portion of your entertainment consumption happens through other channels, like whether it's Netflix or Hotstar or Prime or whatever it is. And I think as we move forward, this will continue to increase. So while companies like PVR and all of these offline cinema halls will eventually come back even after the post-COVID situation, but I think the share of digital consumption of entertainment will continue to grow. And I would look at education in a similar way, that you will have very premium and very sought after offline universities where people will want to go. But I think a mass of the entire education system will eventually move to digital and technology enabled modes for the future, right? So I think that's how I would look at it. And schools will need to use technology aids to make learning better, as well as manage remote learning. So I think that's a high level. I think that summarizes how I look at the situation. Yogesh, back to you. Maybe on any of these areas I can talk more when we have the Q&A.
Kashyap, thank you so much for giving us an overview and putting a structure around how the three phases the EdTech has evolved. And you also mentioned about professional skilling, future-proofing our careers. I read this somewhere, a quote: jobs belongs to the company, but the career belongs to the individual. So nowhere you can leave the career to the organization because of unprecedented changes that are happening. And you also talked about the acceleration. I read it, Zoom went on from a subscriber base of 5 million users to 300 million users. So I think COVID has only accelerated what was likely to happen in the edutech space. I think now the edtech is on a steroids, I would like to say. So thank you, Kashyap, for sharing with us the overview on the professional skilling space. So I'd like to invite Sumit Mehta, the co-founder and CEO at Lead School, to share his views and thoughts on future of education post-COVID. Over to you, Sumit.
Thanks, Yogesh. Thumbs up to check if you can hear me. Great. I guess Kashyap did a wonderful job in just laying out how professional skilling and learning for adults has been evolving, and how COVID has actually accelerated that movement. I wanted to spend some time talking about what happens before professional skilling comes into play, which is schools. And I guess professional skilling still kind of talks about the upper end of the segment, but in India, 96% of our students go to schools. And when we talk about what's going to happen and what is happening, it's important to understand that India is not really one country. I mean, it's literally three. And what is happening currently is very different for the three segments. So the elite and rich, they were sending their children to high fee schools. Their parents have high ability and resources to manage stuff at home. The children's own learning itself was at a good place, and their teachers have decent skills to pick up technology and continue online learning. So you would have seen that in the first few days, a lot of high fee schools were able to quickly shift to online learning, and these people actually saw very little disruption. But the reality in India is 8 to 10% of people actually belong to those categories, and the big mass is in the other two segments. I like to call the second segment as the aspirer segment. I think these are lower middle class parents who are sending their children to affordable private schools. Now these schools fulfill a very important role because these are the schools which are actually educating the large mass of children in India with some real education. But unfortunately, the parent skill actually to help out the child at home is relatively poorer. The teacher skill herself is actually poorer. So therefore, these schools have required additional partnerships to kind of get the learning go on uninterrupted. In fact, we have seen that a lot of affordable private schools have reached out to us to actually continue learning for their students. We currently serve about 2.8 lakh students actively attending school every day through the Lead School at Home program. and most of these children are going to affordable private schools. So essentially, what the school could not do, we've been able to provide, because there is a reality of parent skill and teacher skill. And the third segment, which is the struggling segment, essentially is people who are daily wage laborers or petty traders who send their children to government schools. And here we have a real digital divide where they don't have access to devices and data, and continuing learning for them has been a challenge. The government is doing some stuff with DTH or Doordarshan or All India Radio, and I think those are really important interventions, because without them there really is no access for these children. So if you think about what is happening, it's really very different for these three segments. But what is common to the schools which are actually conducting online learning or which are being faced by COVID is that I've been working with schools for the last 15 years, and one thing I've always seen is that schools are really, really big on status quo. I think they are the biggest example of Newton's first law of inertia. They just don't change, because they believe that if something has been running, for 30, 40, 50 years, what's the need to change? But what has happened with COVID is that schools which were resisting technology and the benefits of technology, which Kashyap mentioned, which is multimodal learning, personalization, schools have been resisting, and suddenly now they don't have an option. It's almost as if something is at their door knocking hard, and they can't just refuse, right? So schools have been forced to sit up and take notice that their old ways of running are not going to continue. They have to embrace technology, and not just as an addition, but as a fundamental transformation in how schools run. The second thing which has happened is that teachers actually have found that experience is not a very good currency in these times. I think adaptability is a much more important currency. So those teachers, who've been able to either upgrade their skill or who were younger and were more technology natives, have been able to adapt and respond to this situation. And those teachers who always said that, I know my subject, I don't need any help, I know what I'm doing, they've been found to be like a dinosaur during a transition. And now they don't have any option to adapt. So I guess from both a school and a teacher perspective, what we are seeing is almost like a vertical adoption of technology and skills required to teach online. And what would have otherwise taken the next 5 to 10 years has actually happened in the last 40 days. And this is unprecedented. And I think this will fundamentally shift how schools are run. And the last bit which has happened is that learning has very quickly moved from mass and one-to-many to personalized and one-to-one. So if you think about it, I think Yogesh said it beautifully that, from Gurukul to later, have been really developed in the image of a mass education system where one teacher is teaching to 40 or sometimes 50 kids, and it's one to many. And to Kashyap's point, we end up teaching to the average. But now what has happened is that there is a possibility of a student to just pause the class and sometimes rewind and figure out whether they have learned or not. And sometimes people can actually see the same class twice. And it was very difficult earlier for a teacher to conduct a class twice in the physical world, but in today's online world, students are actually doing it. We see in our online school, there are almost 2x children who are viewing the same class at least 1.5x or 2x, who are pausing and rewinding. And it tells us that, teaching to the average had so much gap, and we are clearly seeing that gap getting fulfilled with online learning. So this is actually happening as we speak, and it has really happened in the last 40 days. But I'm going to take a pause and say that a lot of people are saying, I don't know whether schools will remain or schools will come back or not. Schools are not going anywhere. I think there was a reason why the Gurukul system existed, and there's a reason why schools exist. And we need to understand that the fundamental need that a school fulfills for a parent is that it enables them to outsource child development and learning to an expert. Now, parents cannot do schooling because A, they have to go to work to earn a living. So somebody else has to do the learning for them, right? Second, they don't have the skills to teach. So an expert has to do this. And third, learning is incredibly complicated. I mean, any of us who are in education know that learning is sequential. So it requires a proper curriculum. Homeschooling is not easy. Learning is social. So it requires a peer group. You can't do it at home. Learning is tactile and sensorial, not just cognitive. So you can't sit in front of the laptop and really learn. You've got to have the tactile and sensorial aspects of learning. So it requires a setting. And learning is mediated, so it requires a caring adult. Now, for older people, they can do it themselves, but for younger children who are not yet self-directed, when we learn about brain development, we also know that only after about age 10 to 12, children develop the ability to be self-directed. So before that, they need a caring adult. So because of all these reasons, schools are here to stay. So the question is not whether schools will exist or not. The question is how will schools transform as they return to a post-COVID new normal? And my, crystal gazing is always difficult, but I'm just going to take 2 minutes to share what I think will happen to schools post-COVID. Schools are going to fundamentally shift, A, in terms of operations, how they operate, and B, in terms of academics, in terms of how learning is going to happen. So in terms of operations, we will have to really think about, social distancing norms, because I think till we figure out either a cure or a vaccine, the apprehension and the worry around this is going to be very high. So we'll have to think about social distancing norms in schools and how do we manage the risk of transmission, because I mean, anybody who's a parent in this call knows that it's really hard to keep children away from each other. So we'll have to think about transportation, what are the seating norms, how to prevent risk of transmission. We have to think about entry screening norms in schools. We have to think about uniforms, are masks mandatory? We have to think about classroom arrangements. Do we take turns? Because currently in Indian schools, 40 kids are in a class. So you really can't really deliver the 1 meter separation. So how do you do classroom arrangement? How do you manage student movement? How are assemblies conducted? How are lunch breaks done? How are exit and entries done? So schools have to really create, and we are actually partnering with our 800 schools to create a playbook of school operations in the post-COVID world, because we know that a lot of ways in which schools currently run or used to run are going to change, and we have to prepare our schools. So we are putting together a playbook for schools for the post-COVID world, which will make available public. So schools can actually start preparing for a new normal from the reference of operations. And from the reference of academics, schools will be forced to adapt multimodal learning. You have to break away from rote learning, because now parents have seen what is possible. Teachers have to really upgrade their skills. The one thing I see is schools and tuition, that barrier is going to break. So schools are going to start getting into their homes, because through technology, they can continue their learning at home. Learning will become personalized. And the last thing which I see is that there will be a much bigger connection between schools and parents, so that, that wall where parents used to leave their children to school and weren't allowed inside except for the PTM or the annual report card distribution. I think there's going to be a lot more collaboration between schools and parents, and it will be mediated by technology. So that's what I think is going to happen in the post-COVID world. And back, they will look very different. And that's all I have to share. Back to Yogesh.
Yes. Wonderful, Sumit. That was very insightful. Me being a parent of 2 kids in 10th standard and 7th standard, it's wonderful news I want to share with my wife. The schools are going to continue, because we're already having tough time handling them at home. So that's good news. The schools are going to continue. So as you said, more and more collaboration has already started, and I have seen that. My son is going to 10th already. There are some online classes. Schools asking for feedback, how the classes are happening, and they're saying that our teachers are getting ready for digital skills. That's wonderful to see that. I think some of the key takeaways for us, this is what Sumit told us, was the different kinds of overall, there are three parts in our country, and we always try to look at school as one, but there are 3 different sectors, segments, or whatever that you are talking about. And I absolutely agree that about the inertia that exists in our schools and colleges. Even at Masai, we were trying to reach out to some engineering colleges, saying that if there are some students in civil engineering or non-tech, if they want to learn some courses, they can enroll and do into it. It took 6 months for us to get the second meeting. So I absolutely agree with you. The kind of inertia that exists in our schools and colleges, I think the COVID has really accelerated them. As you must have seen this, some of the WhatsApp messages, what led to the digital transformation in your company? And there were three choices. Was it the CEO, the CTO, or the COVID? And everybody said COVID. And I think the same thing is going to happen in schools and colleges. I think it's going to have the inertia moved away. And it's wonderful to know that Lead School is helping to create a playbook. I think not many would be in a position to know exactly the operations, what they need to do. It's a wonderful initiative from Lead School to help them with the playbook. And I'm sure you will put it in a digital format also if they want to see in action how it goes overall. So that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing. Over to Divyata for the press question and answer sessions, please.
Thank you all our distinguished speakers. We now open the floor for questions from the media. We have with us Liffy Thomas from The Hindu, Navita Swaroop from Navbharat Times, Sampath Putribu from Your Story, and Manish Singh from TechCrunch. I would request our friends from media to display a raise of hands and we will take your questions one by one. Liffy Thomas, you have any questions?
Yes.
You can go ahead and just please mention who is the question for.
Either of them could take it. Hi, everybody. Thanks for this panel. Will digital education will penetrating further post-COVID, will it also become more cost-effective?
So I think if I can take that, I mean, my take on this is more this that digital education in general, the focus has been on making it more cost effective and scalable from the start of it. So I would say yes, I think it would. So fundamentally, because EdTech and because we are leveraging technology, the entire platforms are much more scalable. And as a result, to handle a larger volume of learners, EdTech doesn't require the kind of physical infrastructure investments that offline education requires. So I would look at it that if the volume grows, then definitely some of those benefits will start getting passed to the customers and the learners. I do not expect any huge swing immediately, but I think gradually as more and more learners opt for EdTech, I think the benefits of it will start getting passed to the learners.
If I could just build on what Kashyap said, I think the change in pricing or value is going to be different for the different segments. My sense is that the value per dollar is going to just go through the roof for the rich and the aspirers, because they will be able to access personalized learning, which might not be on an absolute level cheaper, but on the value per dollar in terms of the learning per dollar. Of course, it's a different level, because now a child can learn much better than they could do in a mass education. And I'm talking from the perspective of schooling. For the poor, I think it is definitely going to increase access. Because one of the biggest challenge that people have faced, especially in migrant communities and, communities where there are daily wage earners, is that if the learning is anchored on a physical structure, it becomes difficult. But if you can just move it away and it can be on demand, accessible anywhere, so access will significantly increase. And I think those are the two benefits of technology, different for different segments.
Thank you. Thank you.
Navita, do you have any question?
Yes. आपको आवाज सुनाई दे रही है, राधिका?
Yes, you're clear.
हेलो. ओके, फाइन. मुझे ये पूछना है, अभी उन्होंने बोला गवर्नमेंट स्कूल्स और मार्क्स के बारे में बात करी है उन्होंने, तो मैं ये पूछूं, जैसे उन्होंने पूछा कि एजुकेशन क्या ज्यादा महंगी या हो पाएगी, गवर्नमेंट्स के स्कूल्स वगैरह जो हो गए जहाँ काफी छोटे क्लास के बच्चे पढ़ते हैं, छोटे बच्चों के बच्चे पढ़ते हैं, उनके लिए किस तरह से आने वाले टाइम में चीजें इजी हो पाएंगी या उनको आसान, क्योंकि टीचर्स की अवेलेबिलिटी जो है खासकर डिजिटल उसमें काफी कम होगी, तो ये इस तरह की प्रॉब्लम्स कैसे सॉल्व आउट हो पाएंगी आने वाले?
नमिता, आई थिंक बहुत ही इम्पोर्टेंट क्वेश्चन पूछा आपने।
थैंक यू सो मच।
आई थिंक गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में प्रॉब्लम इस समय एक्सेस का है कि जो बच्चे गवर्नमेंट स्कूल में जाते हैं वो घर पे हैं, लेकिन उनके पास ना तो स्मार्टफोन है ना डेटा पैक्स हैं, तो जितने ऑनलाइन लर्निंग ऑप्शंस हैं वो उनको अवेलेबल नहीं है। तो मुझे लगता है कि जब बच्चे स्कूल जाते थे तो हम उनको मिड डे मील दिया करते थे टू इनेबल लर्निंग, राइट? अब वो घर बैठे हैं तो उनको डिवाइस और डेटा देना पड़ेगा टू इनेबल लर्निंग। तो वी जस्ट, आई थिंक गवर्नमेंट सेम बजट को अगर रीएलोकेट करे ना, कि फूड फॉर द स्टमक को अगर फूड फॉर द माइंड से रिप्लेस कर दे और मिड डे मील को अगर डिवाइस एंड डेटा से रिप्लेस कर दे, तो एक्सेस का जो इशू वो हम सॉल्व कर देंगे। अगर एक्सेस का इशू सॉल्व हो गया तो लर्निंग रिसोर्सेज की कमी नहीं है।
ओके,
तो मुझे लगता है गवर्नमेंट के लिए वो जरूरी है।
ओके ओके, थैंक यू।
Sampath, you have any question? Manish, do you have any question?
Yeah, I have two questions. So, can you hear me? Can you hear me?
Yes, Manish.
Yes, Manish.
Yeah, so this is the question for anyone who wants to answer. So, are you seeing a surge in paying customers? And in general, how do you look at the monetization aspect? Do you want to sort of gain users because you are like, obviously everyone is saying more number of students trying your services. So, at what point do you think you will start to explore monetization aspect? And second, are you having conversations with private schools to see if they want to collaborate? Is that something that you're interested in?
So I think in terms of the growth of paying learners, I'll take that. So we are definitely seeing a pretty significant growth in terms of paid learners. So while I think everybody, including us, there is a kind of a social responsibility side of it, that a lot of the content is also being made freely available. But practically what we see and what is our biggest differentiator is more the engagement side of learning, which is where trainers are teaching people, and we have a very high engagement learning structure for all our learners. That is what finally drives results, because the biggest problem with just online video learning is basically more this, that you have completion rates which are in lower single digits, and most of the people will take a course but never complete and never get the outcomes. So I think people who are serious about their careers, they also realize that finally they need to take a slightly more structured program, and that will be available only as a paid program. Otherwise, I mean, practically one of the wonders of digital and internet is more this, that if somebody knows how to teach himself, then all content is available free. Practically anything under the sun that I want to learn, I can get it free on YouTube, right? But finally people realize that if they want outcomes, then they will have to take something more structured. So we are definitely seeing a growth in paid learners, and given the global business, this is something that we are seeing not just in India, but it's a global phenomenon. So we are seeing a increase in US as well as rest of the world markets for Simplilearn. It's a pretty pronounced trend.
I would just echo what Kashyap said. I think in terms of paid users, I mean, there is, for us, paid users are schools. And we saw that, our cycle typically ends for the next academic year by March, April. But ever since COVID has hit, we've got multiple new schools coming on board, paying for online classes for their students. I think for children, what we must recognize is that it is even harder, because for them to figure out what they need to learn, I mean, there are only very few self-directed learners amongst children who can actually go to YouTube and start learning. Majority of the children are used and require a structured curriculum, which a school or an online school can provide. and that is what creates the opportunity for payment. So we've got private schools asking us for offering the Lead School at Home program to their students, and we are seeing paid. So both is happening.
Thanks. I think we have a question from Sampath as well, but he had to go in for another call and he hasn't shared his question. Any more questions from anyone?
There is a question from Sampath, I think, now on the chat.
Yes.
Let me read out that question. This question is from Sampath. He says that, what does it take for the existing system to become redundant enough so that the adopting of e-learning becomes mainstream, especially if a model like income sharing agreement goes to show that university education has a large set of flaws? This needs to not necessarily be confined to coding boot camps.
So, Yogesh, you want to take that?
Well, we have already started it. So ISA model is what we are pioneering, and we have seen a lot of interest and traction on the income sharing agreement model. The people are getting more and more aware of it, and some of the colleges have approached to us saying that how does it work? Is it workable, feasible? All kinds of questions and discovery sessions are happening. We as a company is also, school is also going through these stages. ISA is a very new way of wherein which we invest in the students rather than students invest in the university and colleges. I think Sampath's question is, can such a thing can be coming to schools to school level?
Yeah, I mean, just adding to this, on the university side, we also have a lot of experience that a lot of universities now are looking at partnering with, edtech experts, especially for highly technological education, which requires very, very quick updation. So one of the challenges, I'm not getting into the delivery part of it, but more in terms of the curriculum part of it that universities face is that typically most universities are structured to update the curriculum once in 5 years. And the pace at which technology and the world is changing, that system itself is getting disrupted. And we have seen a lot of partnerships with schools in India as well as in US, where they look at us as a partner to power their entire learning for some of the education areas where very rapid updation and changes are involved. So areas like data, cloud, cybersecurity, and so on. So we work very closely with universities to power their programs. And I think that will only continue to increase. So I'm not touching upon the income sharing side because we don't work in that area. But more in terms of powering curriculum, I think universities do need good partners, especially for digital education.
Yeah.
All right, we now come to the end of the Q&A session. I now invite Mr. Yogesh Bhatt once again to help us with a quick summary of the entire discussion and share some key takeaways. Over to you, Yogesh.
Yeah. Thank you all. It has been an indeed very insightful and invigorating discussion around both education at schools, college, and professional skilling. While Kashyap spoke about how the evolution of the edutech has happened and what stage we are in, and COVID has accelerated, and Sumit helped us with understanding how India is structured around 3 different layers, and each of them would need to handle it separately in order to make sure that post-COVID, how education can move forward. And he spoke specifically about midday meal food for mind, so that it can enable device and data that can help students to learn from home. While the challenges are many, while some of them would move for much faster and adapt to the changing world, while some would require a more push and support from the ecosystem. But change is not option here. As they say, change is universal, but changing is personal. So it's up to the individual, organization, and the school to lead this forward. Otherwise, as Charles Darwin said, that It is not the strongest or the most intelligent that survive. It is the one who's adaptable gets survived. I think this particular situation of COVID has seen that how human being has this great ability to adapt when things are pushed. I have never done work from home for 24 and a half years of my career. And then in the last 6 weeks, I have not stepped out of home, and I've been even more super productive than what I would have been in office. I think we have a great ability to adapt. And with the ecosystem enabling, whether it is organizations like Simply Learn, or we have the Lead School helping us in preparing the playbook and getting them all ready, I think we are all set for Education 4.0. With these words, I would like to thank Kashyap Dalal, Chief Business Officer and co-founder at Simply Learn. I would like to thank Sumit Mehta, the co-founder and CEO at Lead School. I want to thank all the journalists who could make it up here and ask the questions to the presenters. I also want to thank the Ad Factors team for putting together this wonderful initiative at this period. Stay safe, fight COVID, and we shall overcome. Thank you all.
Thank you.